Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you're at, ladies and gents. I am Kura Isagami, your resident tinkerer and MedaRotter, and this is the MedaRot News Network, bringing you all the latest developments and happenings with our favorite pet fighting robot series. Now, this week's special episode is going to be a rather unusual one, as it's not going to be particularly a presentation-based or lecture-based presentation like I've done in the past up to this point. This very special episode actually is a chance for me and some special guests of mine to break down some rather interesting developments with the MedaBot IP that's been floating around in the cryptocurrency market, as there has been a lot of misunderstandings and a lot of questions about what exactly is going on and what exactly is entailing that situation. So for this week's special episode, I have named it MedaRot versus MedaBot, an imposter among us. And with that being said, let me go ahead and introduce my special guest to join with me today. Alright guys, we are now officially live. I'd like to introduce my special panel with me here this week. Up front we have Callie Dory, I've mentioned before in previous episodes as a special friend of mine and a fantastic artist. Callie, it's good to have you with me for this episode. How you doing today?
I'm doing pretty alright, I'm just tired.
I imagine so. Time zones are definitely something that I have to deal with, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Alright, well it is great, like I said, to have you with us on the show. Metal Chalman up next, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. I greatly appreciate it.
Agreed, and thank you so much for coming. I do appreciate it. And last but certainly not least, Gold Card Jack, or Gold Card for short. How you doing today, man?
Yeah, not bad. Similarly tired.
I imagine. Yeah, like I said, time zones are definitely a fun thing to try to coordinate for. We had to coordinate for this one just a little bit on all sides, didn't we?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like evening here, but I woke up at like 4 a.m. So yeah.
Yeah, I imagine that's fun. So basically, with this special episode, as I mentioned in previous, I want to try to keep it as just more of a factual thing more than anything else. Just a chance for us to kind of take everything that we've talked about up to this point, you know, in the community server, and just kind of lay it all out there and try to use it as a way to explain to people, okay, so what exactly is going on, what can we do, and why exactly is cryptocurrency tied into this? So with that being said, I want to go over a brief timeline, just for a brief moment, just to kind of bring everyone up to speed on what exactly is going on up to this point. And what I had currently, and you guys are more than welcome to correct me anytime or toss in any comment as you see fit, but what I have here that ties MedaRot into the whole issue is up to 2016, Imagineer absorbed current and publishing developers such as Rocket Company and Delta Arts at the time. It was also brought to my attention that the original trademark for the name Medabots, the English IP, also the English trademark, my mistake, did also expire up to this point. Am I correct?
I think it expired in 2012.
Right.
There's feedback.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. Up to 2016, the trademark expired while Imagineer was working on its other developer companies at the time.
Yeah, it was in the middle of merging or absorbing those companies. And I don't think it was 2012 because I did, back in 2012, I was actually researching this specific thing. And I found that it was still active at the time. Now, I could be somewhat wrong, but that's what my initial research showed at that time. Right,
but pretty much up to that point, like I said, it was up to that point, the Imagineer was still working on absorbing those developers for various business reasons, and the trademark kind of expired under their noses without them really paying attention. In 2017, the trademark license for Medabots, as mentioned, expired and was purchased as Imagineer is working on finalizing the merger with the above-mentioned developers. And then at this point as well, Kevin Comadran has bought the license while Imagineer was busy with the merger. So at this point, he does officially own the trademark for the English name.
Yeah.
All right.
I think that is only with... don't quote me on it, but I do believe that's only for the European Union. I do believe that under U.S. law, that technically Imagineer will still own it, partially also because it's been in use and there's certain laws. Don't take this as legal advice, but like it's under U.S. law. Like if you use a name, usually what happens, even if the trademark goes out, you still technically get to keep that name.
Right.
On, like the situation, yeah.
Right.
Imagineer has been using it constantly.
Right, and it has been brought up in previous conversation that they actually have used it fairly recently, I guess, with the with the Wii U Virtual Console with the introduction of 2-core. So it's not like the trademark for that name has been completely, left by the wayside as people like to believe it has been. It just has not been necessarily touched as often as people may perhaps wish or desire. At this point, when Imagineer realizes that Kevin has purchased the trademark, they very quickly were able to renew it for other reasons. So, just as Metal said, Kevin was only able to secure it for the European Union. So, at this current point, he only owns it there. Imagineer was able to reclaim it everywhere else and renew that trademark. So, towards Imagineer's credit and efforts, they were able to at least contain it.
However, I often see them talk about how they own it in other locations as well, not just Europe. However, don't quote me on that. It's just things that they say on Twitter.
Right.
So I can't
Right.
prove that.
Right, and one of the big reasons why I really wanted to have Callie on the show, especially, is because she has been paying very, very close attention to a lot of these comments on the coin in general with the crypto side, and probably on the front line when it comes to actually reaching out to folks on trying to help clarify the issue whenever people ask if they own the IP or the trademark, because they are two very clearly different things. And for that, I really do appreciate the work and effort that you have put into it, Callie, and I really am looking forward to hearing your feedback on, as we go through this special panel, on kind of laying the facts out there on firsthand experience on how how receptive people may have been to comments or clarification. But moving forward with the timeline up to this point, in 2020, Imagineer releases MedaRot S Unlimited Nova on mobile platforms, and was relatively successful in its first couple months, I believe. I want to say in the first week it had at least 500,000 downloads, which is fantastic starting out the gate. At this point, however, Kevin also realizes what Imagineer has been doing and proceeds to sue Imagineer on the grounds of MedaRot, the original name, is far too similar to Medabots, which is the name he purchased, and therefore bars Imagineer from the EU on release of not just MedaRot S, but also anything MedaRot related. So that could include merchandise or even potential consideration of a localization, which they actually have voiced in the past of wanting to consider. And this is essentially where things started turning sour rather quickly, if you guys would agree. Yay or nay?
Yeah.
Definitely. I'm gonna say definitely. Yeah, it's when things started getting really bad. Now, when I did look over the legal documentation for that whole thing, in my opinion and from what I gathered from it, it seems to be that they are just not allowed to call the game MedaRot S or MedaRot or use just MedaRot, but they can still sell the game. So for people I've seen out on Twitter and other places saying, oh, they're banned from releasing anything because Kevin owns whatever, this, as far as I've read into the documentation, isn't true at all. In fact, they could tomorrow just name it something else and release it over in the EU and everywhere.
Right, as a way to basically sidestep whatever demand that Kevin placed against them from the original suit.
Right.
Yeah, one thing I want to mention about the trademark stuff, you keep mentioning it's the European Union, but I think, at least in my case, I'm in a country within Europe that's not part of the EU, and it's like the stuff it's also banned here as well, so I think it's Europe as a whole.
Right.
European Union.
Right, absolutely. And like I said, that definitely did annoy a lot of people when that came to light, especially with how successful MedaRot was with its mobile game release, especially with the hopes that with the release of the mobile game, Imagineer did make a mention once or twice in shareholder meetings, if it was clued in correctly, that depending on how well the success of the game went, they would indeed consider localization sometime down the line. Now granted, this information was from their shareholder meeting about a year and a half ago, if memory serves correctly, but the information still does prove to be somewhat consistent with what they've mentioned and what they've talked about. So I believe what happened here between Imagineer and Kevin probably did end up putting a wrench in that works until they could probably get that situated.
Yeah, he's effectively, I think, when you were saying how things got sour earlier, I think he's effectively, well, or I guess fair, since there's more than just him now, but basically they've stopped Medabots from existing outside of Japan now, which has I guess, upset a lot of people.
Yeah, exactly. And then on top of that, just to proceed forward, Imagineer also did file a counterclaim, however, that goes toward and filed a trademark dispute toward Kevin in attempt to try to have the courts revoke and counter any suit that Kevin made against them and have the name returned to them. So it's not as if Imagineer has not been doing anything in particular with it just yet, but they did at least get the ball rolling not too long after the original suit barred them from Europe. So they're still effectively working on it.
Yeah.
All right, and then kind of leading up to present day here in 2021, Kevin has recently teased his new game and announced a cryptocurrency, the MetaCoin, ahead of the release to mill interest and value in the new coin to try to get that minted and officially get some revenue going for that. In addition, he and his team have also begun stating somewhat dishonestly that he claims to own the IP for the Medabots and claims that the game will be the revival of the series. Now, for a number of reasons, we have found more times than once that this is also untrue, as claiming to own the IP has been found as basically him saying that I own Medabots in its entirety, which would also include iconic characters such as Medabi and Rokusho, when in reality, the only thing he purchased was a name. So he only was allowed to use the name, but he's claiming to own more than he believes.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, in addition to this, kind of leading up to it, I also did some individual research on my own, just kind of figuring out what exactly cryptocurrency is or how it behaves, because it is a rather, I'm not going to say ambiguous market, especially because of notions like Bitcoin, for instance. It has regained somewhat decent popularity. I'd even say Elon Musk with Dogecoin really put a spotlight on the cryptocurrency market as well. But based on the research that I found 3 different sources just to give me a basic understanding and description of what cryptocurrency is. An article I found on NerdWallet says that it is a form of electronic payment designed to use in exchange for services that a specific company provides. And it did also want to specify that it's a currency that specific company themselves provide service for and the currency for. So this is essentially like saying, as a random example, Walmart decides to mint a new cryptocurrency, but their currency only applies to Walmart-based products and services. So you can't use their currency anywhere else.
Yeah, which is what they're effectively doing with the MetaCoin.
Correct. Another source I found on CNBC describes it as, at its most basic, a cryptocurrency is a digital asset that utilizes computer code and blockchain technology to operate somewhat on its own without the need of a central party, be that a person, a company, central bank, or government to manage their system. And this is actually where I found a lot of people actually have been wanting to really get into the crypto market, because unlike, say, the stock market or standard investing through such, the cryptocurrency is not officially monitored by anybody. So it doesn't have anyone overseeing it to make sure that it maintains some form of consistency with the rising and falling of its values. In a sense, it's more of a private investment in a way to earn money, supposedly.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I might be getting too far ahead here, but I believe NFTs are also involved with this MetaCoin thing.
Correct, yes. They have mentioned that multiple times. That is indeed involved.
Obviously, that's NFTs are like a whole different beast compared to cryptocurrency, but
correct. And like I said, with the rise of Bitcoin, and even for the meme's sake, Dogecoin with Elon Musk, like I said, it did definitely raise a really wide spotlight on the crypto community on what exactly it is. And people start asking and putting it under scrutiny, essentially, to say, is this really the supposed get-rich-quick scheme that it supposedly is advertising it is? And with that, I did actually find a number of other principles that people have described it under. One of which I found is what people are calling the greater fool theory. And to explain that briefly, it says, to gain value and profit, someone must also purchase what you have purchased, but in more quantity and at higher value. So essentially, to put this another way, let's say, for instance, you invest $10 in pencils, as an example. In order for you to get profit off the pencils and $10 that you invested, someone has to purchase 20 pencils at $25 in order for you to make profit. And then in order for that person to make profit, someone has to buy more at a higher value, and so on and so forth. In addition, they also... Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying that's a bit odd that it requires someone else to buy, and then it's like kind of like a stair,
In essential,
like a pyramid.
essentially, yeah, pyramid's a good way to put it, actually. But at the same time, it's trying to force generate competition. So again, say for instance, if there's 100 pencils, as another example, you buy 10 of them, that leaves 90 left. That means if it's $1 per pencil, if someone wants to buy more, they have to buy a single pencil at a higher value of currency in order to outbalance what you purchased.
Also scarcity, or in this case, virtual scarcity.
Correct. That's what they're trying to push on, and with the what's called the greater fool theory. In addition, a lot of people have also stated that cryptocurrency has a lot of flaws, especially as a brand new coin that's trying to make its way into a market in a community that's absolutely flooded with numerous different kinds of currencies also trying to make their way. A couple of the particular points they mentioned is the lack of stability. Cryptocurrency is incredibly volatile, and the value of the coin does not remain consistent and is reliant on the theoretical cash flow. So, like I mentioned earlier with the greater fool theory, and like you mentioned with the artificial scarcity, it's trying to force that scarcity and revenue flow by forcing people to buy more at a higher value just so it can get its feet off the ground.
Yeah, which has been like I've been accompanying the values and whatnot of the coin, and it's like very inconsistent. It's constantly going up and down. Right now, it's been at a consistent value for a couple hours, but
Right, and
yeah,
if I recall
it's been going
correctly,
up and down constantly.
and if I recall correctly, you said it usually likes to range between like what 0.0006 and 0.0008 or something, somewhere thereabout.
Yeah, around that. Yeah.
Right. The other thing that people found on cryptocurrency is that it's also very largely reliant on the promise. And that promise is it'll become more valuable in the future once it takes off. So I'll invest then when it's at its highest value. The issue, however, with that is that that promise is not guaranteed. That promise is the assumption that it will carry on and get more value, a week down the line where, much like the stock market, you have to watch it by the day essentially. It's under the assumption that you'll purchase more then when the value is high and hold on to it and then sell when it's low. However, because it's a cryptocurrency and it's not being monitored, that's not guaranteed or promised. So it also fills itself with a lot of holes that largely base itself on assumptions.
I think you said something backwards. It's you buy when
Right.
it's low and you sell when it's
Right, my mistake. I do apologize for that. But yes, it is largely based on that assumption, though, that it'll gain more value then. So people are saying, well, why would I buy now when it's cheap? Or, why would I buy now when it's expensive, when it's going to be cheaper down the line and I can buy more and then sell on the next spike?
Yeah, it's kind of like it's pretty much gambling. But
Exactly.
long term, it's not immediate.
Exactly. It's essentially like an unmonitored stock market, the way I understand it. And the issue is that because it's not being monitored, it has a whole lot more volatility to it that makes it that makes it more difficult to track and keep account on. On top of that, the legality also has been brought into question and scrutiny multiple times throughout multiple countries. In recent, China as a whole just recently banned cryptocurrency entirely. So in one market as well, for people that on the China side that might have been investing in it, that basically shut down all of them as one example. As I mentioned, the laws on allowance do vary further, also very heavily reliant on the stability of said coin in question. It's not backed or supported by any government or monitored by one, so as mentioned before, and there also is no accountability for assistance if something happens. And that also is something I found is a huge pain point that cryptocurrencies have had a rather difficult time trying to counter with, because if something happens to a coin where it suddenly drops in value or just disappears from the market entirely, all the people that invested in it are now kind of out in left field saying, where's my money? And when they try to bring it up and ask, they have to say, we can't help you or we can't compensate you because our coin doesn't exist anymore. And with that being said, neither does your money.
Yeah, I find it kind of interesting they decided to do this, because I think Kevin announced this game for like around a year ago or something.
Right, and because of that, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I don't think so it was originally part of the game until recently.
Right, and Kevin did mention that he wanted to at least mint the coin ahead of time so people could generate in it, at least based on what their website and what he personally has mentioned, or if not him, some of his dev team have also mentioned it in the past of wanting to get this ready ahead of time, so that when the game launches, they at least have something generated ahead, before then. But some particular questions that I found. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Callie.
I was asking, speaking of legality of crypto, someone in the community said that it's illegal in the UK. Can you confirm, Jamesy?
I'm gonna be completely honest, I haven't a clue because I'm not really involved in crypto, but yeah, I mean, we'll just have to see what happens.
Right.
The thing is, we don't even know if this game's going to actually be released yet, so it's kind of hard to say how it's
Right.
going to be.
Right. And when their initial launch dev stream came out, it was rather oh boy, how do I put this nicely?
Basically, they're not really showing much of the game.
Right. Well, that's a way to put it. Yeah. They were supposed to supposedly launch the game, I think, sometime about September 21st or 22nd. And if I recall correctly, they actually got delayed because artificial bots and community ended up botting the game, so they had to delay the launch.
Kind of ironic.
What I remember that happened is, like, they basically, they were just saying, oh, the devs are working on it, There have been like 2 or 3 hours or something. They just kept saying the same thing, and people were getting mad in the chat.
Yes, I did poke my head in there. Yeah, I did poke my head in there, and they were getting really upset because, they were supposedly hosting giveaways for their coin, and they were only paying attention to their Telegram, for instance, but anyone who tried to answer their question on the YouTube stream was completely ignored. And I saw at least 1 or 2 people on there that said that they got a question correct, for instance, but they had to literally pester whoever was moderating it 3, 4, 5, 6 times just to get their comment looked at. And I think even 1 or 2 of them even got banned for the spam because they wouldn't stop. Because they were
also people, I think 2 people or something, that didn't get their tokens right away whenever they managed to buy.
Right. So it was suspect to me at the very least that they were not paying attention to one particular community, and that also was leading to the frustration because they were trying to focus it primarily on their Telegram, assuming everybody that was on their Telegram would just keep that open with the stream. Or at least that's my understanding of it anyway. But after some other research I did on the crypto on exactly what it is, how it behaves, and if it's consistent or not, as well as the legality, some particular points I found with it as well, and these were also reinforced by people who are indeed in the crypto business, but also for bigger names like, for instance, Bitcoin as an example. They state very, very clearly, and even very big name stock market sharks also say this too. Read the fine print and do the research. So basically, if you want to invest in a crypto, naturally you want to read up on it. Study the coin in question, look into it, who is backing it. That also, they said, is one of their big things you want to pay attention to. If you have very big names, celebrities, businesses, other big name cryptos, etc., backing the coin, and they also have a very valid and credible source, then you could probably put a little trust in the coin that, it's at least going to be consistent and there's going to be people backing it. In addition, they also ask you to question, is it been a developed and reputable coin, or is it just starting up? Because, as mentioned before, if the coin is just starting up, it is the most volatile, so it's going to have no value, and any value it is going to obtain, much like Kevin's MetaCoin, is going to fluctuate far too violently to actually get any consistent idea or number on where it's at. In addition, the other big question that they're encouraging that you ask is, what will you own, quote unquote, when you buy in? Oftentimes, more often than not with crypto, when they offer, say, if you invest now, you'll get this and this and this, they're making a promise that you'll either own a part of the business or the community, or you'll own into something that's being invested into it. So when they say, invest now, buy, and earn this, are they being credible with that? And do they have information and reputation to back up what they're stating?
Yeah, another thing I think it's probably worth pointing out is that maybe some people have come here from social media, because Medacoin are actually pretty active on Twitter. what I
Yeah,
understand.
we have definitely noticed that in recent. Callie especially has been on the front lines trying to keeping an eye on that, and we do appreciate that. But it said that, but very largely based on what I have seen, and based on what Callie has seen as well, it seems to be very largely, and this is just my suspicion, by the way. A lot of alt accounts are bots because more often than not, they're sharing the same thing over multiple platforms and multiple comments. Almost to the point where they seem to be sniping particular hashtags. In this case, the Medabots hashtag. Anyone that mentions it will somehow or some way clue them in to send a bot or an account their way to say, hey, look at our coin, look at our game, it's upcoming, it's going to be awesome, even though it's completely unrelated.
That's calmed down a lot recently. It was really at the beginning. There were accounts that would just spam under people's posts, or just reply on other coins profiles. You know, the whole shilling and whatnot. Hey, try our coin. And it was like strings and strings of the same post. It was ridiculous.
Right, and
Now
I do
it's
remember
calmed
seeing that.
down. Yeah, now it's calmed down a whole lot, and now they've mostly decided to start replying to celebrities and mentioning those celebrities and telling them, "Oh, we'll make you a MedaBot if you support our coin."
Right, and I have seen those comments as well. It is getting kind of, I want to say outrageous, but at the same time, that's not necessarily the word to use, as it looks like at this point, they're not necessarily targeting specific celebrities. They just seem to pick names out of a hat, or at least that's what it looks like they're doing, or it seems like
No,
it.
they are targeting specific celebrities, at least those that sometimes mention crypto. They were tagging Eminem for a while. I think they've calmed down with that. Now it's Busta Rhymes because he's been mentioning crypto a whole lot. Snoop Dogg, and I don't have any other names in my head right now, but they have been on a consistent group of celebrities, at least.
Right.
They are typically involved in crypto.
I see. So they're still trying to at least get their name out there with folks that at least, dip their toe in the water to see what it's like, or if they're just, sponsoring it, for lack of a better term. And I wouldn't be surprised either if their comments do end up getting largely ignored, because more often than not, and quite likely the case, there's going to be about 1 million other people trying to do it too, and whoever is managing their accounts, if it's not them directly, are very likely going to be turning off or have already turned off notifications for things like that. So say for instance Snoop Dogg posts a comment to Twitter saying, I'm in LA getting ready to do a show, looking forward to it, hope to see you guys. Very likely it could be one of two cases. It could have been him actually posting it, just trying to get the involvement. It could also be someone who's probably managing the account for him because he was likely busy with something at that particular moment. But more often than not, I'm very confident in saying that he likely also had any kind of notifications on his account turned off, so that he's not constantly getting pinged with spam nonstop of people commenting or retweeting, say, notice me, Snoop Dogg, looking forward to your concert. Hey, check out this thing I did for you, Snoop Dogg. What do you think? Because even though it is definitely going to be in the genuine interest of saying, looking forward to seeing you or wanting to support him, it is going to be very spam-based, especially because of the following he has. So I highly anticipate that if they are constantly spamming these people, their comments will probably go unheard.
Yeah, I expected.
Right.
It is definitely quite a messy situation.
Yes, but then again, after all the research I did on the overall opinion of crypto, the general idea that I've read, both from people that do shill it professionally, as a big-time position, or even people that, have knowledge on it that are in the official stock market, inversely, they seem to have the common ground of saying that it's still too new to really track or keep an account of, because it only just recently spiked. Like I keep mentioning Bitcoin, Elon Musk with the Dogecoin. It's still too relatively new to actually have a monitoring system in check to help maintain some sort of consistency, not just of one individual coin, but also pretty much of cryptocurrency as a whole. Because of this, there also is no proper accountability. We have mentioned this before, so if something happens, you're kind of out in left field and lost any particular money you invested. High risk, low profit due to the volatility. And as mentioned here before, and as we've noticed in the past with the development of the MetaCoin, it is a very easy to create and run a scam off of this. So it does make it rather tricky to determine who is a legitimate coin and which one is just there to shill a few bucks off of someone and then just disappear after they made their quota. In addition, I wouldn't necessarily say this is a negative impact to it, but it can be seen as one, especially with the high volatility of the crypto market, of the total anonymity. So it's a two-sided coin. With that anonymity, you can guarantee that if you are trying to mint a coin or if you're trying to invest in a coin, it's not necessarily going to track back to you. In addition, and inversely, rather, if something happens and you lose money out of a coin, like say for instance the coin disappears or crashes, and you try to file a claim to get at least some money back, you can't get anything back because the coin that you invested in no longer has a name.
I see.
On top of that, with the introduction of with the MetaCoin, we have done our research on that and what they supposedly claim to promise with the MetaCoin and with the supposed game, and I decided to ask myself, is it credible? So after doing research on their website, on the Indiegogo page, and on other places where they posted, or we have found any particular screenshots or news pieces of anything in particular with it, I decided to kind of compile just a few screenshots of what they supposedly promised. I'll go ahead and stick that in the group chat for you guys to take a look at too, to follow along. Of course, the one big up in front, it's the Medabots new game. That was from their Indiegogo page. As you see, it had no backers, it had no money invested into it, so it kind of flopped, I want to say, the moment it was first dropped. They did also explain what exactly the MetaCoin was on their website, the cryptocurrency BNB token, and how it can be utilized. They also posted a lot of goals on what they hope to achieve as well, with what they were funded on and what they hope to achieve in the future. A couple of the ones that stood out to me the most were the mobile game, for instance, that they were going to release on iOS and Android this year. They were saying sometime about December 2021, and they were hoping to try to get a Nintendo Switch game launched sometime 2022. We actually had a friend of ours who was going to join us on the panel and unfortunately could not make it due to outstanding circumstances, who actually does have a hand in game dev and actually did release something on the Nintendo eShop and of course the Steam the Steam shop as well, that kind of debunked any potential hope that this game might have had for the Switch eShop, as Nintendo apparently is very, very specific and very nitpicky on what they allow.
Yeah, and he also disapproves of the whole thing, the whole layout. There's a lot of inconsistencies. He does not believe that footage shown is of actual gameplay and that it's scripted at Unity.
Exactly, and a number of us actually as well have pointed that out with the supposed trailers that they have released up to this point. They do have a lot of inconsistencies and raise a lot of questions. So pretty much like you said, Callie, it looks like a lot of their screens might have been scripted. So it might have been just a one-time animation, and then cut the camera, and then they just play that over and over, which they actually have been. The assets that they have used have also been traced back to Unity assets that you can get relatively easily, more or less anywhere and on any Unity version. So anyone has access to these. So they aren't necessarily exclusive assets that they're using for these. The bots that they designed might be, and to an extent, I would probably question the design concepts as well, but I won't go into that discussion this time. But yeah, the Unity assets we have found to be traced back to Unity store stuff that can be bought by more or less anyone, and the trailers and teasers that they have released all kind of share the exact same asset between them, which does kind of hurt their overall credibility as a developer trying to tease a brand new game.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty interesting to see what happens. I mean, let's say, like, theoretically, if this is to be released and it becomes successful, like, what's going to happen to the Medabots franchise from there on?
Yeah, exactly. On top of that, I did also take a look at what their supposed goals were for their 1 year, by their 1 year mark upon launch, and to be quite honest, I mean, it's nice to shoot for the stars, essentially, or as the quote goes, essentially, shoot for the moon, and even if you miss, you still are among the stars. It's nice to think that way, and it's certainly very ambitious too, because it does like to keep that morale high. However, at the same time, especially with a development project like this, you do also have to think feasibly and realistically. And the goals that they have posted just don't seem all that realistic, at least to me anyway. What they said was that by their 1 year mark, if this game launches, they wanted to have easily a 20 million player base between what they mentioned here as Europe, the United States, China, and Mexico at about 5 million each. Now, I don't know about you guys. I mean, 20 million users is definitely a very high goal to reach, and it's very ambitious. But I mean, even if we were to look at games like MiHoYo and Genshin Impact, as massively successful as that game was, I don't think its player base is near this.
You also got to consider, because they're sort of frontlining this crypto thing. I think you mentioned earlier that China actually has banned crypto.
Yes, that also is absolutely going to really hurt any potential goals.
Exactly.
Right, and then the revenue provision as well also seems relatively ambitious, and at the same time doesn't seem overly feasible in my opinion, because they're making a lot of high promises and a lot of assumptions that it will succeed and that it will take off, but they aren't necessarily accounting for the fact that if it doesn't.
Right.
One inconsistency I've been finding, sorry, just finishing this. One inconsistency is the releasing date. Like, it constantly switches. Like, it's either Christmas or October or November or Q4. So there's never really a date, and they haven't really shown anything related to the game.
They only keep showing the same teasers over and over, essentially.
Yeah.
Right, and even the
It's very unrealistic.
Yeah, and even the teasers that I've seen too or looked for, they show largely the same renders of the exact same 2 bots, maybe 3 on a particular rare one, over and over in the same poses. So it seems apparent to me at least, and Callie I think made this observation as well in our own discussions, that it looks like they're mostly switching things around in like a Photoshop program to make at least 8 different variants of a teaser essentially, and then kind of see if it works.
Yeah, shoutouts to her.
Yeah.
They also reuse a lot of like templates. Like, we found out not too long ago that they reused. I think it was a blockchain video. I don't remember the exact name, but we found that it was the exact same video, like that one with the QR code. It was the exact same, but they only changed the logo at the end, and the QR code leads to Thai Wikipedia. They didn't even bother to check the QR code.
Right, and on the note of Wikipedia, I am actually glad you brought that up. We have actually had an instance in the last while where, when we noticed the Wikipedia page, someone did bring it to our attention that it was apparently changed to where it was stated that Kevin owned the IP for Medabots at that current point and not Imagineer. So naturally, people were very much so on the ball of trying to make sure that got corrected, because it is indeed an incorrect statement, even for Wikipedia, and got that changed relatively quickly. However, it seemed apparent that someone was watching the page and tried to have it changed back. Supposedly, according to the edits, it might have been Kevin himself, but nothing to officially confirm that. But at the same time, we were able to get those edits also reverted and then get the page, or at least request to have the page locked until it can be confirmed and sorted out. So I do really appreciate you bringing up the Wikipedia page on that note, as that has been another front where they tried to, in this case, dishonestly state that they own something that they do not.
Metal wanted to talk earlier, like, go ahead.
Oh yeah, sorry, I do apologize, Metal. What'd you want to say?
At this point, I forget what I was going to say, particularly on the earlier subject. But yeah, what you were saying about the Wikipedia page is indeed correct. I'll be right back. I gotta go take care of something real quick.
All right. In the meantime, something else that was brought to our attention as well, we have touched on it briefly up to this point, is all the spam that's been spread across all the platforms that they try to advertise on. I only just pulled a couple of comments here that have been brought up in recent, one of which was from the Medabots Forever page and community on Facebook, where one of the other head devs tried to advertise the game in hopes of trying to generate some interest there. But as you see by the comment mentioned, of course I did also blot out names for anonymity's sake. He did also try to correct and stand ground, saying that this is not Medabots, because, reasons stated previously, because it's only the trademark that they own, it's not the official Medabots. But it has also been mentioned here in the comment that it has been refuted, and it didn't seem like the comment necessarily stuck. Another comment I put here, just for the sake of mentioning it, was one of the communities that seemed to be blindly following the MetaCoin in its development, trying to say that it'll be, the coin of all coins, more or less, and that we're simply hoping that it'll fail, and too stuck in the past need to be upset with whoever they're claiming is Credentia. I still yet to figure out who that is. Be mad at them for letting the trademark expire and things like that. But one thing that did stand out to me, and Callie did make mention of this as well, numerous people have actually, any questions that they come up that are brought up to them, legitimate, genuine questions about it. They don't even need to be malicious, just asking, what's the consistency of the coin, are the goals realistic or feasible, some very simple questions, not trying to incite a fight or anything, just trying to ask questions. The questions seem to be dodged, or they seem to change the subject to something else and try to shift the blame on us for scrutinizing them because we don't believe that it's going to succeed.
Yeah, another thing that they have the tendency of doing is if you challenge the fact that Kevin owns or doesn't own the IP, they get extremely upset and start calling you names and just tell you to do your own research rather than provide you with evidence.
Correct, and I've seen those comments firsthand myself. Callie has seen a number of them as well. It seems like, don't get me wrong, support of something is definitely great, and if you want to defend something, that's all on you. I'm not going to say what you can and can't defend, but at the same time, if someone asks you a genuine question, like say for instance, if I were to get a chance to speak with Kevin personally, I would ask him up front, do you think these numbers are feasible? Do you think that the 20 million player base, in your first year, especially now that China has banned cryptocurrency in its entirety, do you see that as realistic? And I would expect him, in order to defend his answer, to provide me the research that he's done to say, yeah, well, I believe it will because ABC XYZ, or I think it was originally, but now probably not so much because ABC XYZ. It's very simple rules of debate in this case. Essentially, is if you want to defend something, you need to provide the evidence to it. You can't shift the blame to someone who's asking the question because they're looking to see if you actually understand what it is that you're following.
Yeah, I think
You're back?
Yeah, I'm back.
I should probably mention that we have no ill will towards Kevin or any of the devs or anything. It's just basically just us discussing the kind of situation.
Correct. And really all they're doing, based on what we've seen, is they tend to dodge questions, and they tend to respond with, just trust us, we know what we're doing, but don't follow anyone else that claims to be us because they're fakes.
Right.
They're kind of expecting you to trust them blindly on this, and that trust will pay itself off before long. But it doesn't seem like that necessarily is going to be the case. Even just as an outsider looking in who does not have knowledge into crypto, as say someone who works with Bitcoin as an example. This is just, again, from an outsider looking in, trying to realize these goals don't seem very realistic or feasible. As I said, it's great to shoot high, but you also need to make it reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
Right,
So,
that is true.
yeah, but with all this aside, with a lot of folks that may be watching or that may watch this video and try to understand what's going on, especially those that want to follow the official MedaRot through Imagineer and want to try to do their part to help spread the word on what's going on, what can we do? And it's pretty much just as we have been, is just spread the word on it, but be respectful. If someone is genuinely unaware, just correct them and explain that it's a trademark dispute currently going on, and not currently, an ownership of the IP as the trailers and teasers claim that it is. But as mentioned here, keep it clean, keep it respectful, because if we get to the point where we start fighting in comments back and forth, we lose any credibility that we might have, and we can't simply say, well, do your research on it, because now they won't listen to us. If we can instead just say, hey, this isn't necessarily correct, this is what's actually going on, and provide facts that say, okay, well, there's a trademark dispute going on, so the consistency of the name isn't necessarily official, for lack of a better term. Here's why. It's a lot it's a lot harder for them to actually refute you, first of all, if you provide the evidence. But if you also keep your cool, it also makes them out to be the jerk in this case, and it makes them lose credibility by arguing with you.
That's the thing that happens a lot to me, is that, like, I ask them to prove it because they keep insisting, or when I provide evidence, they just never reply back.
Exactly, because I think they probably caught on that if they proceed with an argument, they're going to hurt any kind of hold that their words will have on anyone that's looking in on the conversation. Which, to their credit, is a smart move, because if you can't win an argument, generally you don't want to get into one. But at the same time, like I said, you want to just keep cool, keep a cool head, and keep it level, because if you can in comments not get involved in an argument and let yourself get lost in it, it provides more credibility to you, to the onlooker, and they can look at you and say, this person has not lost their temper, they did not call names, look at this person over here, they're shouting and using exclamation points all over the place. Who's got the level head here?
Correct.
Exactly.
But another thing that we can do is to understand the difference when you describe it. A lot of people will say, especially the followers of Kevin and his crypto, that he owns the IP. And with that, and we have touched on it briefly through this episode thus far, there are very clear differences between an IP, intellectual property, and a trademark. If someone says they own an IP to something, it means that they basically own the entirety of a project or a franchise. So in this case, for instance, the Pokemon Company, we'll use them as an example. The intellectual property of Pokemon goes to them because they own that name. They own that intellectual property. Now, a trademark is simply a name or a name that's used for an intellectual property. So in this case, Medabots was the English trademark that was minted when the series was first localized. So what Kevin ended up purchasing was simply the European rights to the name Medabots, not necessarily the IP that he is led to believe.
Right. The other thing, too, is because Medabots is also a translation, as I'll describe it very quickly as rot in Japanese has a different name. It's actually usually a shorthand for robot. In the English, in the Western side, that translates instead to bot, as rot is usually referenced to decay. Bot is our shorthand for robot. Therefore, it tends to act as a translation of that word rather than just a normal, like, oh, we're just going to trademark it this something different. Like, when the original Star Fox was released over in the U, they changed it to Lilac.
Yes, I do recall that.
Yeah. In this case, it's a lot different because it's also a translation. So, if I want to talk about Medabots over in Japan, I translate it usually just to Medabots, and then usually clarify it's actually called MedaRot in Japan. But
correct. But because it's still a well-known name, MedaRot and MedaBot, if you were to use either term, whoever you're speaking with would still understand. Especially the Japanese community, because if you say MedaBot or MedaRot, they will say, oh, they are speaking about this series, because both names can be used interchangeably with it. And that's at least where I noticed a lot of the misunderstandings have sprouted from, essentially, with the discussion, especially with people that are following and supporting Kevin and his currency, where they say, oh, well, they're two completely separate IPs and two completely separate names, so Kevin was completely in the right to sue Imagineer and bar them from Europe. Not necessarily the case. The common term that I like to use in this case, or the simile I use, would be essentially like you, kind of scrounging through the junkyard one day, and you buy a used factory sign for Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. You buy the sign for $20 and take it home and put it up on your garage, and now you think you can claim that you own Willy Wonka's chocolate factory because you bought the chocolate factory sign. It's about as silly as it sounds, but it's basically what looks like it's going on here. Kevin sounds like he bought the name, but then he thinks he bought the IP that comes with it when that's not the case.
Right. And even so, on top of that, to make a note that I did a while ago in the chats, this question was actually posed to several lawyers. Where they said, hey, if you purchase a trademark, you now own the IP, And I want to be as serious as possible when I say this. Again, to preface, this is not legal advice. Nothing I'm saying here is legal advice. But this is my experience from working under a lawyer and my experience from studying law as much as I have. So consider this my opinion. A lawyer never states things very often in absolutes. They are always either going to ask a question, they're going to rephrase it, they're going to give you information. They never ever say absolutely yea or nay. So when one of the answers to this question, this one lawyer came up, the first word, in writing mind you, which again they almost never do, was its absolute 100% first word, first sentence, only word in that sentence, no. That is very serious. So
The fact the lawyer makes a very clear and concise statement like that.
yes, it's very clear and concise. And now this is U.S. law. It is federal. It's not like statewide. It's a federal law. IP and trademark, I do believe both fall under federal law. I know trademark does. So basically in the U.S., this could be, if he's claiming certain things to own, that is, as far as I understand, a federal crime. So yeah, this guy did say no.
Right, and that does further validate what we've been saying at this point, that when Kevin or whoever's on the dev team decides to say we own the IP to Medabots, we can confidently say with a matter of fact, no, you do not. You've only purchased a name. So now it's going to be up to them, if they choose to proceed with that argument, to prove that they own an IP for that. And if they do the research, they'll find out that they only own a name, and very likely will probably ignore the argument or stop commenting because they know they're probably wrong.
Yeah, it's just at the end of this day, like, for me specifically, as a game designer, I understand a lot of stuff because I've worked with a number of indie studios, including ones that sadly are now defunct. But one of the things I do know that is something that happens from time to time. And if that's really the case with Kevin, like he's come in and he doesn't really understand this, and maybe he got a bad lawyer, like I feel bad for the guy, like if that were the case. If he's really trying to honestly make something cool, that's great, but he definitely needs to get himself a higher quality lawyer, or if I would say he definitely wants to do that, because definitely I don't think, in my opinion, he'd be able to sell this game in its current form.
Right.
He is making the game.
Right.
I am going from an idea of he's trying to be legitimate.
Right, and I mean, if he does genuinely, see himself as a MedaRot fan, I'm not going to discount that or bring it into question. I'm not going to, dig into his personal life or his interests, because that's none of my business. And if he's trying to do something, then I believe I need to commend the effort where it's due. However, I do believe that the way he's going about it is not necessarily the correct way to do so. In addition, much like you said, Metal, if he is being misadvised, that also could really hurt any chance he has, because he's going on assumptions and understandings that are not necessarily clear.
Yeah. The other issue that I have is if he is being legit and he is getting this bad advice and all this, like, this can hurt him or even blacklist him from ever making or working with another game dev company.
Right.
Game dev companies don't like fraudulent actions. They will avoid people and sub-companies that do this, usually, if they do their research.
Absolutely. I mean, even, going back to a moment where he said that he wanted to, hopefully get a Switch port for this supposed game soon. We have to remember, this is Nintendo we're talking about. They are probably the most, scrutinous when it comes to fan games or official things that they let on their platforms. I mean, a lot of people, much to their discredit, a lot of people see this as as a pro and a con to them. The pro to it is that they are very fiercely protective of any IPs that they own or anything that they allow on their eShop or on their platform. So if you manage to nail a place in the eShop, you're set, because Nintendo's going to have your back with it. Inversely, at the same time, if someone's trying to make something Like, say for instance, a lot of the popular ones are like the Pokemon fan games or the Pokemon hacks. Like, for instance, one of the immediate ones that comes to mind is Pokemon Uranium, the project of a while ago. It was a fantastic game. The devs had no interest in, getting money off of it or selling it or doing anything with it. They said it was just primarily something they did for fun for the community, as another game to play. And they had a lot of really unique elements in there to help it stand apart from the Trademark and the staple Pokemon games. But Nintendo still came up to them and said, "Hey, nice game, knock it off or we're taking you to court."
Right.
Thing is, like, since they still have the Medabots game, like, in 2 core, in their Wii U Virtual Console, imagine if Kevin actually manages to see Nintendo's, like, try to make a case for his game. What
Right.
would happen?
Exactly, and especially someone like Nintendo, it's as very in-depth and picky as they are. They're probably going to say, and if I recall correctly, actually, just kind of diverting that topic briefly, onto the trademark dispute that Imagineer did mention. I just want to touch on that briefly. It doesn't look like Imagineer's trying to outright crush anything that Kevin and the dev team are trying to do, which is nice on their end, because it's not like they're saying shut it down or we will destroy you. It looks like it's more case, or at least the way I'm understanding it anyway, it seems like it's more a case of Imagineers trying to let Kevin attempt to explain himself with it, in a sense where his explanations and his responses will basically speak for themselves on Imagineer's favor. So, like, the couple instances where they said, when I briefly read over the document, Imagineer basically said, "Hey, we released 2 different games on the Game Boy Advance under Medabots, the RPG, Medabean Rokusho version, and Medabots Axe. Have you ever heard of them?" And if I recall the document correctly, Kevin said his answer was he never heard of them before. Imagineer stated, we released Medabots Infinity on the GameCube. Have you ever heard of this game before? Kevin once again says no. So at this point, it's at least clear to me Imagineer's trying to let their arguments speak for themselves by letting the defending case, in this case Kevin, try to show himself for what's going on to the courts, so then the courts can say, well, he doesn't have any kind of defense in this case, so the only thing we can do is just award it to the petitioner, in this case Imagineer, because there's no evidence to counter the case.
Yeah, the other thing, too, was something I think you originally brought up a couple years back when this whole debacle started. The original models that he advertised appear to have come from Medabots Infinity.
Yes.
So, technically, if they find out that yes, they did, and they can trace it back to him maybe breaking open that game, he just committed perjury, which is a crime, and that has a sentence. So
Right.
I just wanted to bring that particular thing up. That's if that is the case, and he didn't just find it randomly.
Right. So there are a lot of holes ultimately in any kind of arguments that Kevin or his dev team or his supporters are trying to provide by saying, he owns the IP, or, you all are stuck in the past, be mad at Credentia. And like I said, I don't even know who that is or where it is. I even tried doing a search for it and I couldn't find anything. The only thing I found for it was I think it was like a nursing facility. I think that's under that name. I suspect they probably meant like Sorry, go ahead.
Kodansha a lot. They also mentioned Kodansha a lot, who are the publishers of the manga for some reason.
Right. But see, in that case as well, the manga would be largely different though, because that would still fall under any kind of IP rights, or in this case trademark rights as well, with Imagineer.
Yeah, this reminds me a lot of the legal battle, which was Harmony Gold versus FASA back in the BattleTech area. And to make a point, there was a situation where people who owned the original IP for Macross was giving licenses out, and one of the licensees decided to give out the license to, I think, FASA. I think that's how it went. It's been a while since I've studied this case, but basically, as far as it went, Harmony Gold allegedly had the proper license, and BattleTech, FASA's BattleTech did not, and thusly BattleTech lost because of that. And I feel that if this is the case where, say, they did possibly somehow purchase an IP from a licensee, that IP is invalid, more than likely.
Because it was a breach of contract, essentially.
Essentially, that would be a severe breach of contract. Like if I came to you and I had a video game IP, and we'll just call it Bob's Day in the Park or something, and I say, okay, you're licensed to produce a comic for Bob's Day in the Park. And you turn around and there's some other company that you then license that to, then I can turn around and say, I didn't license that to you, I'm suing you, and then that turns into a giant ball of worms.
And you honestly would still win in that case because, you know, as the original owner and founder, you did not give permission for them to give that IP elsewhere.
Right. And because Rocket Company was absorbed into Imagineer now owns that entire IP as far as I fully understand in this situation.
It'd be the same thing with Delta Arts, too.
Yes.
I mean, just to bring this into another example as well, in Genshin Impact, for anyone that has not been following that recently, the community has recently been talking about what's been labeled as the Leaker Hunt Decree. And just to mention that briefly, there was a lot of negative feedback about characters that were released in this recent patch, saying that in the closed beta that they could do this and this, but then in the official release they couldn't, or multipliers were not the same as what were listed in the closed beta. And it made a lot of people very upset because they were expecting one thing, but then the official product was another. So as a result, MiHoYo is starting to really crack down on trying to take care of leakers once and for all, but because of the way Chinese law is, they can't hunt them down directly. So they're trying to sue the video sharing platform Bilibili in order to try to get the courts to demand to release the names of their leakers. And to kind of tie this into why I brought it up, when you sign up, kind of tying into what you mentioned as well, Metal, when you sign up for something, like say for instance a closed beta test, you have to sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, to say that anything I see in here will not leave my lips, I will not share it anywhere, I will not share it with anybody. What I see in here is strictly for private use between myself and whoever I'm reporting to for any bugs or developments that I think need looked at. And in this case, the people who were leaking the beta content of Genshin Impact were breaking the NDA by sharing screenshots and data leakage of, you know, characters that can do this, this, and this, and then MiHoYo has to turn around and say, oh, well, now we have to change it, or because it didn't behave right, so we have to modify it. And then people got upset over it.
Right. And, yeah, that is the thing, too. And like I said, also when I did a tiny little bit of research on what they were saying, like they were getting IP from this other publisher. What would they call it again?
Credentia, I believe is the one that they're going for.
Yeah, I wonder if that's just a misunderstanding of the actual.
I think it is Kodansha. I think it's like a misspelling or something.
That's what I was honestly suspecting too, because I was assuming they probably think of like Nelvana, which had a large hand in producing the anime when it was localized. So if that be the case, I could probably see where they're coming from, and I'll have to and I'll wipe clean that particular instance of them trying to pose an argument because it's just a genuine translation error. But at the same time, it still ties back into the fact that they're not providing evidence to support their arguments, which in and of itself also is destroying any kind of credibility they might have with anyone who might be looking in that has interest in the topic.
Right.
Kind of interesting though. I wonder if what came first, either the idea for a new Medabots game or like a whole crypto thing, because I kind of get the impression that like maybe he had the idea for crypto first and then decided to use the Medabots name to like boost interest or something.
Based on how at least how I heard it said anyway, it sounded like he had the idea to do a game first, because Kevin was reported to saying that this game, well, quote unquote game, is supposedly 5 years worth of work, because he started on it when he bought the IP back in 2017. The trademark, supposedly back in 2017. And I mean
it's just a whole sort of view on this is like, if I was in a position where I decided I want to like make a Medabots game or something, like why would you not just make a game like similar to Medabots or something? I think people brought up on the Discord not too long ago, like there are a lot of games similar to Pokemon, like stuff like Digimon, for example, exists, and it's
Temtem, I think, is another one that started getting some popularity recent too.
exactly. It's like, why would you not just from? If I was to like ask him one thing, like, why would you go through all this effort to try and make something when you could have just made a game similar to Medabots?
Right.
Would have so much
Right.
easier.
Right. So we have gone over what exactly has been going on with this, with the crypto scene. What exactly is crypto? How is MedaRot tied into it, and where the current development on it is, and what we've observed through with Kevin's followers and supporters, both on their streams and on Twitter or anywhere else that they're trying to promote. So I believe we've probably covered this subject relatively well in about the hour or so that we've been recording up to this point, which is still fantastic nonetheless. Do you guys have any particular closing comments or opinions on this as we kind of wrap up here?
Yeah. I think as somebody like, wish Crate were here because he'd probably back me up on it. But as I've worked in the industry, and now that I work with very much bigger professional company, I've been confused the entire time on just kind of why Kevin's been doing what he's done. Now, I notice a lot of these actions that he's taking, I usually notice in people who are usually making a game for the first time. They have some capital, they want to actually do something, but they have very limited knowledge. And I feel that there's a possibility that he's being possibly taken advantage of because he might have not understood something, got a few lawyers, and he may have gotten bad lawyers. I've gotten bad lawyers in the past on projects and different things that have happened. Like I'll get that's happened to me. And then later on you find out they've been disembarred, which is never any fun. But my greatest I'd say professional opinion, but not anything in financial. This isn't a legal or financial opinion. As I always have to preface this with is I would actually suggest, because right now, as far as I see it, he's created kind of a poisoned brand, and that's not a very good thing to have. My greatest advice would be to probably drop the Medabots name, call it something else, and sell it back to Imagineer, because there's a chance Imagineer will just straight up say, okay, we'll buy it, and now he's got more money.
Which he can use to develop a proper game.
Right, but if he keeps on to it, this is it's not gonna look good for him. It's gonna further poison his brand. But we're here explaining everything about what's been going on, and generally, in my experience, it's not going to usually end very well. He might be able to release a game and sell it for a little bit, but the negative responses, especially if like a bunch of YouTubers get a hold of it, because I know how the journalist and response YouTubers are, there's a good chance that they'll just rip this to shreds, and then he might, and if he loses then to Imagineer, then he has a bunch of legal fees. If they sue him for profits, then he has to deal with that, and then they might, and again, not legal advice, but they might be able to sue him for damaging their brand, and that's not a good thing.
Quite possibly, and that also is a good point to bring up.
Yeah, this is very, in my opinion, I feel this would be very bad for Kevin to keep him and his team to keep moving forward. I've seen sort of similar stuff, and it always leads very bad. Like I point out again, between FASA and Harmony Gold, if I remember correctly, FASA did have to eventually pay Harmony Gold for the use of what is now called the Unseen. So I could see possibly something similar happening with Imagineer if they win. And I'm always going to preface with if they win, even if it's like a 99.9999% chance, which in my opinion I think is the case. But yeah, if he loses, this could be extremely bad for him and his company.
Right, absolutely. Callie, GMC, you guys have any particular closing thoughts on this?
I mean, I think if I was to say anything, again, like I mentioned earlier, I'm not really that involved in crypto, but I would say if anyone's considering getting involved, like investing in this, I'd strongly suggest maybe being very cautious about that.
Read up, do your research, essentially.
Yeah, but I mean, just judging what we know and what we've seen, like collectively, there's a lot of things about this that are a little bit suspect, to say the least.
Right, and we've made our thoughts and opinions on this rather clear over the last few weeks.
Definitely wouldn't risk sort of, like, again, to anyone who's considering investing a lot in this, I would just urge you to not sort of put all your eggs in one basket, because crypto is kind of volatile, I think, as Kuro was mentioning.
Absolutely, absolutely. But anyway, I really do appreciate all you guys coming in with me on my show for this special episode. Callie, Metal, GMC, thank you so much for stopping by and providing me with your thoughts and feedback. Definitely going to be hugely appreciated. And thank you so much. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
Not a problem. I do apologize for the airplane overhead. You probably can hear.
I actually didn't hear anything there, man. But yeah, like I said, thank you so much for stopping by. I really do appreciate your thoughts and feedback on this. And it'll be very valuable to hold on to, that we can use this to maybe share around and pass around for anyone that's genuinely curious or interested in what's going on, or just wants a basic understanding of what's happening, so they can make a decision for themselves, what to do.
Yeah, don't take what they say at face value. Do your research.
Correct.
Because, today I had the pleasure of seeing an individual that actually did his research and contested what they were claiming in the Medabots Twitter.
Correct. Yes, I did see that.
There's light.
There's hope coming. There's hope coming. We just gotta keep doing what we can. And again, just to wrap up on that, for anyone that is watching that just needs an idea on what you can do, as we said, do your research. What we said here are just our thoughts and opinions on the matter, and just kind of laying out a timeline of what's been going on. So don't take our word as law. If you don't necessarily believe us, or if you maybe want to do some individual research, by all means, please do. There are lots of sources and lots of different people you can ask, not just within our community, but also elsewhere for the legal advice, for instance. Metal, you were invaluable for the legal advice and the comments you gave us, both in the realm of law and as well as the game dev. So it was fantastic having you here with us on that as well. GMC Callie as well on the EU side of the pond for the feedback on that. Callie for on the front lines, keeping up to date with the comments on that and all the spam or developments on that. So as I said a bunch of times, I'm going to say it once more. Thank you so much for coming with me for this special episode of the MedaRot News Network. Your assistance was greatly appreciated.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime.
All right, and with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here. So give me just a second. All right, and with that said, once again, I do appreciate you guys for stopping by. It's always happy to have you in for a visit, especially on this very special episode. Until next time, this is your host, Kura Isagami of the MedaRot News Network, signing out.